Call to order the January 18, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Crowded. Roll calls.
Trustee Hallwax. Here. Trustee Listener.
Here.
Trustee Mealopoulos. Trustee Underdog. Here. Trustee Rubin. Here. Trustee Scott.
Here.
President Rowland.
Here. We're not live streaming this meeting tonight, but the video recording will be available on our YouTube channel. Next item on the agenda is public comment. This portion of the meeting allows those in attendance to address the board regarding non-agenda items. If you have something you want to say about an agenda item, not yet, I'll space that and get that item on the agenda. If you have a comment on a non-agenda item, all comments are limited to 3 minutes, and I'll tell you when you have to stop. Are there any comments on non-agenda items? All right. Next item on the agenda is a discussion regarding the possible renewal of a licensing agreement for the Glencoe Streetery. And I'll ask Village Manager Crowley and the Assistant to Village Manager John Pape to present. And I note that we also have Glencoe representatives and the first Village Manager Crowley.
So John's going to lead us off here just with a bit of a recap on the streetery and the process that brought us to this point. I think at that point, it may be beneficial to hear from our folks from Guildhall and then a board discussion at that point. So John, you want to
Thank you.
get us started?
Just wanted to review a couple of the highlights from the memo, just to kind of bring everybody back up to speed on this discussion, since it's been nearly a year since we had it. If you remember, in April of 2022 is when the board first approved the street structure as it is today, approved new design guidelines for the downtown as part of that, and then the streetery structure. Prior to that, there was the greenhouse structures that were also part of this use of space in the right of way. But the streetery structure is when the village reset the expectation for the licensing fee that Guildhall pays to use that space. If it paid 50 cents per square foot, for a total of about $450 per month over the last 2 years, since April of 2022. That agreement has run on a year-to-year basis since it was most recently renewed in April of 2023 through April of 2024. So it is set to expire April 30th, 2024. Given that date approaching, we're having this discussion tonight just as an opportunity for the board to provide input so that the village staff can work with Guildhall in whatever direction the board chooses, and kind of put forth a new set of expectations for where we're going to be on that. I did want to note some of the use of space pieces that we talked about this time last year. Guildhall talked about reducing their use of space in the right of way on the sidewalk. They previously had more tables and chairs set up on the sidewalk. They stretched in front of in front of the bank and in front of some of their other neighbor properties in an effort to try to reduce their footprint. They've scaled back and really focused on the streetery structure of the area. Guildhall does have 3 carryout parking spots, but they only use them during the dinner service, which admittedly is when we see less need for parking in the downtown, and that works out pretty well for all parties. Other than that, I think the highlights here is that the streetery structure itself was installed in October of 2022. And so when it was getting renewed at that point, we hadn't yet seen it in summertime. So this is a chance to kind of reflect on that, having seen it out for a full set of seasons in 2023.
I don't really have anything
Okay.
to add. John did a
So-
nice job.
All right, so I'm going to ask the Guildhall folks, tell us, what you think we should do and what the considerations are. And let me just mention a few things that you should, let me say first, we are thrilled that Guildhall is in our uptown business district. When I grew up in Glencoe was a place that restaurants came to die. That was true for 40 years, maybe 50 years, and Guildhall started to change that. And so we're glad you're here. When we did the first igloos and then the streetery, it was a response to COVID, and we did some sort of extraordinary stuff then. I had COVID last week, so it's not gone, but it's sort of gone. And the country is moving on, we're trying to move on. So here are the concerns that I think we should think about. One, the streeter is this big thing on the street, by the sidewalk. It's a big edifice, can't see through it. And there is a debate about whether this is what we want our uptown business district to look like. So that's thing one. There are differing views. And so that's one thing. Second thing is, are we charging an appropriate price, which seems, it's pretty low for. There are no comparables. If you can take a comparable that says, okay, what's the square foot for restaurant space in Glencoe? That's up here. What's the square foot for some parking space that down here? But did we charge the right price? Do we need to change that? And then the third thing, and I have to say I'm concerned about this, is we've heard from some of the other restaurants in town and other folks that are in the uptown business district. Can I get one of those? Can I have some of the street? And the answer, I think, is going to be no, because we would be a Casbah with a little tiny lane if we let everybody build out into the street. So another question that we need to think about is, can we do this for Glencoe, but not do it for anybody else? So with that, have at us.
One second. Jeff Shadeback on behalf of Glencoe. I'm here tonight with Jerry and Jen and Alec Litowitz. Thank you for having us and entertaining this conversation now many years in a row with us. I think one of the things, Mr. President, that we think is important to note is while we agree not everyone's having COVID, not everyone's getting COVID, and I'm sorry you had COVID last week. Our reaction.
COVID, miracle cure that geezers like to get to take. So,
Well, we don't serve that at Glencoe.
Maybe you should.
Our initial reaction to COVID and when we first approached Phil and the staff here and then eventually this board was we had to come up with a way to keep the restaurant alive. So you joke that for 40 years they came here to die. Well, COVID also killed a lot of businesses, not just people. And we didn't want that. There are roughly 60 employees. Is that the right number, Jerry? And Jerry and Jen and Alec and myself thought strongly of keeping all of these people employed and not letting go of them. And also continuing to have the benefit of food in our community. Something that we also learned during COVID is people stopped going downtown as often. Other reasons, of course, they're not going downtown as often is because our news glorifies it's too dangerous to go downtown. I'm down there all the time, so I proved that that's not true. But a lot of people in the North Shore are not going downtown to eat as often, which is why we're seeing in villages of Wilmette and Winnetka and Hubbard Woods and Glencoe and Lake Forest and Lake Bluff, more and more restaurants have come to this area and are doing real business on the North Shore that they never did. I think if we were to tell some of the operators in the city 10 years ago, do you know so-and-so could do the following business? They'd say that's impossible. That'll never happen. And now it's actually happening. But we had to react very early on. And that was the idea of the greenhouses. We actually partnered with Louis Rubin at Hometown to build the same structure to simplify things for the village. So they weren't trying to approve all kinds of different structures from a safety standpoint, life safety, et cetera. And that was our reaction. I will be, on behalf of the four of us, I can assure you that was not a fruitful business decision, because all we did was lose money for 2 years doing it. We went and spent a fortune to build it to then just not make any money for 2 years as a business because there was no money really to be had. We were told you couldn't have people inside of a restaurant that they were used to going inside of. So we did get in deeper into the takeout business, carry out business, nighttime, as was mentioned earlier, not daytime. We actually built a sushi restaurant concept called Horiyasu, which didn't exist. We did that out of the number of people who would say to us included, I wish I could get great sushi at the North Shore, but I don't want to drive downtown and I don't know where to order sushi from. So we were like, well, we'll figure this out. So we partnered with somebody in the city. Well, we really asked her, she's a consultant to us, but she has a very successful business in the city. And we said, educate us and teach us how to build a sushi business, which we did, still exists today. It actually appears on, some of the menu items appear on the Guildhall menu because so many people want to be able to eat a variety of things when they go out for dinner. You know, maybe your kids want to eat something and you want to eat something else. So from our standpoint, while the pandemic and COVID may not be the topic of conversation every day anymore, we had those 2 really bad years that we're still digging ourselves out of. And we made a conscious decision after first investing in the crash wall, which we thought was important to do because it sent a message of safety and security. And you could sit there and not fear if a car unintentionally hit that wall, that it wasn't just tables and chairs and you'd actually get hit by a car. You have concrete in front of you. And double down with your blessings to build a streetery. And that streetery was something that we had seen countless examples of in major cities around the country, around the world. New York has tons of them. The city of Chicago has tons of them. Many of those cities have gone on to extend these types of structures and outdoor dining into perpetuity. As in, it's no longer a COVID conversation. This is now a way of life. People like eating outdoors, eating in structures that are not inside of a restaurant or inside of a physical building. So we doubled down and went and reinvested to build what's there. I forgot who made the comment of not being able to see through it. There are 10 windows, 10 large windows, not a small window, but there are 4 that face to the east, 4 to the west, 1 in the north, 1 in the south. So you can see into it. I will say that those boxwoods, Joe. The boxwoods, we did because we thought it would take away your staring at concrete crash wall. We like the idea of the boxwoods. If that's what people in town are finding offensive, that they can't see more directly in because our boxwoods are blocking the view, we can trim the boxwoods, we can remove the boxwoods. We just thought that similar to what they do in the city of Chicago, there's actually legislation that to build structures in the right of way, you have to put green. Structure being in the right of way of a sidewalk and or street loading zone, you have to put green, which is why we elected to do that. I don't even believe when we first presented that to Phil and team, that wasn't even an ask. We just thought that would be the smart thing to do if people are gonna walk by this every day and see it in town. The height of it, a lot of that came down to code. We didn't choose some of that. It is heated inside. And in order to have that heat, there was a certain height that we were told we had to build. Unfortunately, you guys approved us in April of 22, if I have that date wrong, forgive me, but April of 22 to build this. And I can only laugh about this today, but the time it took to get the materials to actually build that cost us all the entire summer. We didn't have anything. And finally, by end of October, I think we announced it's opening in early November. We finally were able to build it from the sunbrella fabric of the green. There's just nobody had fabric. So we couldn't build what we were trying to build because materials didn't exist. And we had committed to a certain look and feel, which had been signed off on by the village, that we weren't going to, I'll use the following term, cheap out and be like, well, can't get that, so we'll just swap it for something else. No one will notice. We waited until we finally had it. And unfortunately, November until now is like literally 15 months is all we've had to try and make back the investment. It's our desire to have it for longer. We always knew that you weren't giving us permission to have it forever. We did, and Phil, we had told Phil, I don't know if it came up at one of the board meetings, but we were also faced with the end of a lease and an option to renew. We didn't just elect to take the option of 5 years to renew. We elected to take 10 years to renew, to make a statement that we want to be here. And we want Guildhall to be here for a long time. And our hope is to be able to maintain a streetery for some time. Again, we're not thinking you're going to line that up with the lease of 10 years. We understand it's public right of way. We also feel strongly that if you were to eliminate it tomorrow, if the decision was, it goes away on the 19th, today's the 18th, and we're telling you, yes, we want to go on tomorrow. We actually think it's somewhat of a disservice to the Glencoe community. Because right now, this is a restaurant that may be one of the only restaurants like this that's open for lunch 7 days a week, which brunch, 2 of those days are brunch, and dinner 7 nights a week. So it's a convenience that with the streetery and the additional seating, you're able to go here and likely get a table, likely even without a reservation. So keeping people up here, not running down to Chicago and spending their money in their community is a positive thing. And it's a convenience thing as well. The things that I'm not thinking of, I can talk for hours.
I think you've set it up, framed it very well. I mean, I would just. I think what I would like to make sure that we communicate, I mean, we've had our conversation, I mean. The whole reason the restaurant itself exists is because we are community members and we wanted to see something in our own community and we're very strong community minded. I mean, having resources in the community and having places where people can gather and you know, socialize, it really, you know, bring people together. So that's why this restaurant is here, period. And we've really taken it upon ourselves to, you know, invest what we can to make a very quality, experience. And, you know, as Jeff said, you know, the bumps in the road, you know, restaurant, you know, it's not without its bumps, and COVID sure was a big one. And, you know, we feel like what we've done has been, you know, very well received in general. And, you know, we see people there that, I mean, in the beginning, we used to see the same faces. We don't recognize anyone we see there anymore. So it's a lot of new people in the community, a lot of people that come from outside the community. And, you know, we think we've been well received and we hear that we've been well received and we'd like to continue. You know, we're committed to the community, as Jeff mentioned. We signed a lease. It's a lengthy lease. It's a scary amount of time to, you know, commit to a 10-year lease. But it was very hard bargain that was struck with the landlord. You know, it was very expensive to renew that lease. So, you know, we're committed and we feel like whatever we do has been, you know, very thoughtful and you know, trying to, you know, my husband likes to say, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so, you know, we feel like we have a great interior. We wanted to make a great interior and great, you know, sense of place in this addition. And so you know, that's what we set out to do.
I'd love to add one quick thing to what Jen said. Part of the structure and the design with the heat inside and being able to protect it from the elements, the only way for us to have invested in what's called FF&E, so furniture, fixtures, and equipment, to have a nice experience inside was to protect it. Otherwise, we're literally, you know, lighting money on fire because you put something nice out there, the weather destroys it, and you have to buy new. And if we hadn't done that, you would have had basically, and no disrespect to Home Depot, it's a great brand, but you'd have Home Depot furniture in there because we'd have to just buy completely junky, weatherproof furniture because we know it's going to get destroyed if we hadn't protected it the way that we did. But I think that is why when you're inside of that space, my preference, I eat Glencoe a lot and I eat in the streetery. So I'm constantly eating out there, not in the restaurant. And then lastly, there was always the writer's room. Do I call it by the right name?
Yeah,
It's the King Stable Writer's Room. The writer's room was created because when Glencoe was created, it was because the Littowitzes and other families had donated to create the Writers Theater and they felt that no one would have anywhere to eat if there wasn't a restaurant, hence Glencoe was invented. So that room in the back where events are thrown is called the writer's room. What's happened of recent is now many events that Jerry and his team are hosting are happening in the streetery. So there are 50th birthday, 60th birthday, anniversary dinners that they're coming to us saying, we want the streetery. We don't even want to be in the writer's room. We want to be out here.
I just to add to that, in terms of the streetery, I mean, for us, it was really important that we all, you know, I talked to the team that one of the things that in hospitality is not the easiest thing to do, to follow this line, but we're an aspirational restaurant, right? And from all ages and from, you know, all from all backgrounds. And but yeah, at the same time, we welcome people with open arms, right? The very young children come into the restaurant and just eat. Like mom and dad will tell me, like, oh, kids want to come here. We're here. The kids want to come here. So, you know, we're an aspirational brand. You know, we built it a certain way. We maintain it in a certain way. But, you know, in terms of hospitality, we're very aware of our footprint in the community and how important that is to us. And to the community in general. And that's what that was, you know, to Jen's point, Alec, we hear that expression from Alec all the time, and it's true. We wanted to do the same in the street. It needed to be compelling. It needed to mirror what we've done inside. So we built what we did the same, we applied the same rules to any type of design etiquette that we have done so inside. So you know, arguably that's no one's problem in the room, but you know, I think it's you know, for us it was just important that we did that. We just weren't putting together something outside that was going to be able to match seats of people. It had to feel like a good bowl.
I would add, sorry, just a couple comments, maybe more direct to some of the questions that were asked. And I'll echo one thing. I mean, Jennifer and I, I don't want to be treated, I'm not saying this because we expect to be treated any different, because I want to address your question specifically. But, you know, Writers Theater, we were major contributors to. The pathway that goes along Lake Hook Road was our money that I was on the board of the Botanic Garden. That path is because of Guildhall. So Guildhall's $3 million. That was $3.5 million. That was $500,000. We, you know, personally spent a lot of money here and for not really the return other than giving back to the community. And so I just want to make sure everybody understands, like, the restaurant is not a great business. It is, I'm not saying someone has to walk around thanking me, but it is a pretty thankless business. I couldn't do what Jerry does. We'd have no customers. But at the end of the day, like, we're trying to do, we care about what it represents to the community and represents from the community to people who come from other places. And I do believe how you do anything is how you do everything. So I just want to say that when we have this dialogue and otherwise, I don't want to be treated better than others or have special, I don't want to be treated worse though. And so when I think about what, you know, some of the comments that I'm struck by, you know, at least for me a little bit, everybody was afforded the opportunity to build that, but nobody else spent the money. We spent $150,000 on that tent. A lot of money, right? Most restaurants, I mean, we lost money in the COVID. We lost money when we started the restaurant. You know, and so, I mean, you know, it takes a long time to make back $3 million. I didn't, it was okay if I didn't. But it was about what is this? And it better be up to our standards and Glencoe standards because our kids were raised here, et cetera. So we believe and we want something, you know, we don't want to build something that we think is great and it's hideous or it's too large. I mean, that is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to do something that is reflective, as Jerry said, of, you know, class and representative, not just of us, but of what we think about this community. And I think it's echoed with our actions externally, regardless of the money. We do things for a reason. The second thing is that, like I said, everybody had the chance to build. We're the ones who spent the money. We were given requirements. We had code requirements from law about height. We had requirements about, you know, there were tents other places, I won't mention who, that didn't look very good. There were the igloos that didn't look good. So we spent that money, you know, I guess I would say, you know, that got up and going. And November 2nd, we announced that we were open. It's been 14 months. It's not been a long time, certainly not nearly enough time to make that money back. That's for sure. If anybody knows about margins at restaurants. It'd be nice to be able to have it open up. And again, never expected you get it forever, 100% not. Got it, no problem. But I mean, can we have it long enough to, like, not have wasted money on it and done what, you know, for the community? I think it's used by the community. The other thing is that the argument could be, you know, again, back to, do we have something others don't? You know, one of our very close friends, a family friend and traveler, we're very close to Julie and Lou Rubin. They're our very close friends. You know, they have 3 spots during the day or whatever it is. I guess honey butter chicken, you know, we have spots that we're using for that structure. So we don't have anything anybody else does other than, instead of having the spots that are used all day, we have a structure on it. So you might say, like, is the issue with the structure, is the issue with the spots? Because there are many other people that have spots. So I assume then the issue that we're addressing is not the spots, because is everybody's spots going to get taken away? And maybe the answer is yes, they all do, but we're not being treated differently. The thing is that we are the only ones at the time, when everybody was afforded it, that built a structure on it, and I think spent a lot of money to do it. So I think what I would argue is that, you know, I don't want to be penalized for doing it, where you had to do it, you follow the rules. Now we decided that someone complained and don't like it, even though it was code, we're taking it away, you don't get your ear. And like, because as a, you know, for anybody here who's a business person, which I am, like, that's a lot of CapEx, right? Like you put in money and you hope at least, I mean, I'm not even wanting to make a profit. Can I get the money back from it? Because at some point, the other thing last thing I'll say is, about COVID and yes, it is partly gone. Our expense structure, and this, anybody, I've investments, that's not my main business, restaurants, but I like hospitality and so own some things downtown. But the whole business of running a restaurant has been upended. The cost of our staff is not what it was pre-COVID. It is way, way higher. We just renewed rent and the rent was 55% higher, 55% higher. All the expenses are higher. And so just for people saying, oh, wait a minute, now you have people and you got this extra space and it's like, if you grab away that stuff and you turn around and just have back to Guildhall, you're running it out. I don't know if you're running out of profit, but you're certainly worse off than you were before. You're 100% worse off. And so it's just the reality of running the business that, I don't want people to sit and go, why did they get it? And they get it. And you kind of want to turn, and I don't want to be, indignant, but then somebody else build a restaurant in town. Like if I can't even have the ability to operate it, doing what other people are doing profitably, then what's the incentive to spend the CapEx and spend the money and be a businessman and create those opportunities? And so I sit and say, I summarize all that, not looking for anything, not looking for anybody's thank you. We do it for ourselves, not for that. But I don't want to be here are the rules. And then you kind of get the, I don't want the rug pulled out where wait a minute, I just played by the rules. I think I tried to do, we tried to do more than play by the rules and create something amazing. And just so I don't view it that, yes, we have a structure and other people don't. They had the choice to do it. They chose not to. Do we get that forever? I think the answer is absolutely not. Not looking to have it forever. I would just argue to have it for a period to use it because we spent the money and we can get the money back. And then we'll figure out, or the town, you guys all have the authority to figure out what happens during the day to those spots. Are they usable? Are they not usable? Does everybody get rid of them? Does everybody not get rid of them? The only last thing I'll say is that, there was an imposition during the middle of COVID, and I know it was delayed, of a 1% extra tax just on food establishments at a time when it's very hard for our clients and for us at the same time. So, having those businesses is a fair amount of extra revenue for the city. And so it's not just highlighting the cost of that. Those spaces that we're taking up that you talked about, the rent, and I don't know what the right answer to the rent is. I do know that I'm paying rent on that to the landlord because at the time we talked about an economic structure, the landlord wanted money from that. So, not everybody can take money from us on that, or you don't have a business. I'm not suggesting that there isn't a higher price. I'm not negotiating on whether that I don't even know the answer of what the cost is. So if that's an issue, let's have that discussion. But I think that it seems to me that, the discussion has to be, let's say for the sake of the argument that someone goes, well, get rid of those 3 spots. And Louis does, and those people do, and everybody does. There's a lot less revenue, and that 1%, and I don't know if the city gets any percent of the extra overall sales tax other than the 1. I don't know if it gets to eat into some of the rest. But you start talking about, it's not $450. I guarantee you it's tens and tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so it's a real economic decision where I say, well, if you said not only do you not get the 10, you don't get the spots. Does everybody's spots go on? And so it's a domino effect. So I just sit and say we worked, I think, very well with the staff here who have been incredibly helpful in helping us keep the business. We love this community. We raised 4 boys. We're empty nesters now, but we love the community. We don't want to do anything that is not for the benefit of the community. But we also are running a business, and so it's we want to balance running the business, doing what's right for the community. And I don't view it, me personally, the fact that there's a structure there that we got anything. We're the only ones who took advantage of an opportunity. And by the way, right now, if it's just a pure economic decision, everybody else is right because we're down money. So we're down money and everybody who chose not to. So then people say, well, it's imposing. But how do we? So there's a law about the height given that you'll burn people's hair off. So and it has got 10 windows. I would say it's 60% see-through, give or take. The corners aren't going to be, the roof is not. So I don't know how much more see-through it can get. So anyways, I just, yeah, and there's lots of little things, we put a new awning in, for our neighbor. We paid for it, didn't even ask, just said, here it is, here's the new awning for you. We just didn't even ask, just here it is, we'll pay for it. So just, this isn't about a mini max or, microing the money. I view it almost the opposite, maybe it's a different view of like, I don't want to be penalized for the things and choices we've made. And I'm not looking for an ad infinitum and we get special treatment. I'm not. We did something, everybody had the chance. We'd like to have it for a bit of time. And then as it relates to post the structure, whatever's happening with the spaces, we'll live by what everybody, else is doing. Like, no problem. That's totally fine with us. So let's stop.
Thank you. I'm glad everybody said all of that. We're gonna consider all of it. Nobody's getting closed out tomorrow. That's not happening. We never thought that was happening. So, and by the way, after we talk about this, we'd be happy to hear from you again tonight. And we're not making any decisions tonight. Whatever we do, we're gonna do our best to be, we appreciate everything you've done. I get it. You and the restaurant are personally responsible for resurrecting the business district in this village. Writers Theater, we get it. So we're gonna do our best to treat you fairly. Doesn't mean we're gonna give you everything you want, but we're gonna do our best to make sure that you feel you were treated fairly. With that, trustees, what do you think? I note that Dudley sent around an article from the New York Times from last October, talking about the point that two of you have made about how there's some big cities that have allowed more permanent structures. And I remember I sent that to the village manager back in October because I read it. But anyway, what do people think about, and in particular, focus on what we've heard from Guildhall and on the questions I've asked and others that maybe I didn't think of.
When you say a bit of time, I'm sure you have done some forecasting. What do you think that looks like?
I mean, to actually break even on the actual structure, I mean, another year of operation, a
From
year of operation. So permission for another year would be definitely the ask.
It's just a simple, take the revenue, take the margin, assuming it stays. No pressure, Gary. And, in 2 years is break even, not making money, but at least we get the money back.
I wasn't on the board when it was originally approved, so I apologize if I don't know those questions. Maybe it's a question for staff. You mentioned a couple of times that everyone was given the opportunity to build this. Was it like, hey, we get one of these in town, somebody build one as fast as you can? How did we decide that?
No, it was an evolution. It was an evolution. So, if you can put yourself back in the spring months of 2020, when pretty much anything that accommodated gatherings was closed. We were in conversations with virtually the entirety of the downtown business district, talking about opportunities that they saw as possible ways forward. The state was making adjustments regularly, sometimes every day, to how you could gather or not. There were a series, if you go back to 2020, there were a series of decisions that were made by the board to find ways to accommodate the business community. And the first was looking at the Village Court parking lot, and that a portion of which was closed in the summer. I believe the board took action in June of 2020 to do that. And at first, Guildhall looked at the possibility of putting up a tent across the street from the restaurant that would have existed in the Village Court lot. It was determined fairly quickly, if my memory serves, that operationally was going to be virtually impossible. making sure that food could be delivered to tables in a timely fashion. The distance from the kitchen to the table was quintupled in most cases.
And crossing burden with
Right.
plate of food.
Right, and we put in a crosswalk in the middle of the roadway, but there wasn't a lot of road traffic at the time, as well. Lots of people weren't driving, but all of those things, were contemplated. There was, at the time, Valor, erected a tent in the parking lot. We were actually even having conversations with the house, which is the tutoring lounge, about the possibility of them opening a remote space in that parking lot that would allow them to meet with students in a more open air environment. So after that decision was made, and I believe that parking lot was there, that closure was a rather lengthy period of time. That's when we began having conversations about the possibility of greenhouse structures or some other small scale dining apparatus and how that could work. And we looked at, and that was something that Guildhall came to us and said, how can we do this? Is this something that would even be accommodated? That led to the break wall being installed, a deck that provided a flush surface with the sidewalk immediately adjacent, and the original licensing agreement that ties back to that construction was really the first licensing agreement. You may also remember Valor, which existed until I think early 2022. They had an outdoor dining area. It was not covered. The second time it was covered, they kind of had three different iterations. It was in the parking lot under a tent. That tent blew down in a storm. It wasn't replaced. The next spring, they erected a tent on the street on Vernon Avenue, which was generally not popular in how it looked. It was not seen as, even during COVID times, appropriate from a visual standpoint. And then the last year of their operation, they had an outdoor dining area that accommodated kind of large umbrellas. Those two dining spaces were in place for a portion of the year. They weren't in place 12 months of the year because they weren't, it wasn't a weatherproof option. So Hometown Coffee was mentioned. Hometown was another business that utilized our sidewalks. Obviously, in the area around Hometown Coffee, our public sidewalks are dramatically wider than they are in front of Guildhall. And so for a period of time in 2020, 2021, they had, I think at one time, 16 greenhouses in place on sidewalk that ran in front of their neighboring two storefronts and then wrapped around the corner onto Park Avenue. So there is a history, without a doubt, of different businesses taking advantage of this opportunity, all of which was, again, in response to a unique time, right? COVID was evolving quickly from the standpoint of how we were dealing with it. And so the various iterations of these spaces kind of followed those changing guidelines. To speak for a moment about the carryout parking spaces, at one time there were many, many more than there are today. Today, starting this week, we have 3 more in the rotation with honey butter fried chicken. Guildhall has 3 in the evening hours. Hometown Coffee has 3 in the morning and afternoon into the early evening. Meg's had 3 at one time, and I think that's it. Valor had a few at one time as well.
There's just one at Meg's now, and there's one that's on the backside of Foodstuffs.
As we that was itself a response to COVID. Curbside pickup of a variety of different types. Guildhall mentioned that they implemented a curbside pickup system. Hometown pivoted to that very quickly at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was done very specifically on the village's side in an effort to ensure proper traffic flow in the downtown. We have seen where we have removed some of those spaces from time to time. Double, triple parking in the downtown, people putting their cars wherever they want to. And that led to the village putting in place a policy and a program that kind of governs how that system works. Any restaurant is able to apply for it. Any restaurant is given one curbside pickup space at no charge, and then they can have up to 3. The second and third carry a cost along with them that is broken into 3 time frames during the course of the day, depending upon the use that they may have. So we talked about Guildhall only using it in the dinner hour. That's when they have, that's when they've elected to utilize those 3 spaces. Hometown has actually, they pay for all 3 periods of the day from 7 to 11, 7 to 11, 11 to 4, 4 to 5, and 5 to 9, even though they close at 6 p.m. So we built that structure to make sure that we could accommodate those types of spaces, and in putting in place a rental fee structure, we've had counter arguments from a number of other businesses saying, I want one too. The argument being, you're not talking about fast service. You're not talking about somebody running in and grabbing something. You're talking about, you just want a dedicated parking space. That's not the point of the program. So we do have that in place, and those fee structures are in place. And John, I bet, can recall what those fee structures are off the top of his head. I cannot.
Those morning and evening spots are $25 per spot. In the middle of the day, 75. That's kind of intentionally
Per week? What's
per month. I'm sorry, per
That's right.
month. Yeah. So, for example, if you had the spot for the entire day is $125. Guildhall, for example, the 3 spots in the evening hours, they pay $50 a month for those spots. They get the 1 for free, and then 25 and 25, $50 a month on top of the licensing agreement fee that they pay for the streetery area. I did want to add that, to your point, that Valor in 2022, the setup they had in the street, it was using the village's Jersey barriers that are kind of like in the median of the highway that we use to put out that space. And they were also paying the same structure, 50 cents per square foot. That's the only other taker we've had. To your question about who else has raised their hand. Those are the 2 people that were interested, right? Was Valor and Guildhall, and Valor certainly moved on from those spots this year, where Lowe's had a extensive sidewalk seating, but not the street or the parking spots.
Other trustees weigh in on, the goal here is to give our staff guidance when they talk this through with Guildhall, so that we come up with something that nobody's 100% happy.
Just ask one question again. We asked this the last time you guys were in. You guys, during COVID, you had the same staff and laid off nobody the whole time, right?
Correct.
I'm inclined to give it to them as long as they want. I mean, I don't know why we consider 1 year. I don't know why we wouldn't give it for multi-year so they can plan their business.
Okay.
I mean, to be fair, like, yeah, we can talk about the terms and the rent and things, but my feeling is this has been wonderful for the town. The restaurant structure doesn't look awful. When the demand goes away, they'll ask us to take it down.
So let me say why I don't think it should be there forever. We can't make that available to other folks. And so we'd be basically saying they're grandfathered forever. But if somebody else asks us, we're not able to say yes. Because if we did it, all of a sudden, we'd have this little tiny, narrow street with structures. And, we have heard from some of the other folks in town that, can we get one of those? They, Mr. Lidowitz is correct. They're the ones that did it. And they get credit for that, and they're not, nobody wants to punish them for that. But we were operating in an extraordinary time. And it does not seem right to me to say, okay, they've done it. And they get to do this forever, which, by the way, they're not asking for. But we have to turn down everybody else because of the way it's going to affect our pretty small uptown business district. So I think we should be thinking about probably the time frame they've asked us for. And then Glencoe should be looking at what we want our streetery to look like. And, there are other, I've sort of looked around at, maybe there are going to be cutouts into the street, so there's more space. But maybe we don't have a permanent structure because our little tiny business district really can't accommodate those. It certainly can't accommodate many of them. Anyway, so that my view is, I don't think it'd be right to say, oh yeah, you're fine forever. And so I was actually, we've talked to Guildhall, and I was actually thinking, okay, we are grateful for everything they've done. But the problems that Guildhall has had, we haven't caused them. It was the pandemic, and that, how can we do this so that we can get back a little bit of normalcy? Start thinking about what we want our uptown business district to look like. But make sure that they're not, we're not going to do a no good deed goes unpunished here. So make sure they can get their money back, and then they can work with the village, come up with something that's good for them. And is also something that we could make available to the other restaurants in.
I think right now is, what are we looking at? A 1-year extension on this
Well,
license? So,
we weren't looking at anything until we came in here. But having talked to them, listening to this, I would say, okay.
well, in terms of, they need to plan their business, obviously their business model. I don't think the question that would be asked today is, we want this to, extend for the term of the lease. So we have been renewing this at a 1-year extension. And I don't think that that's unreasonable. I think they bring a lot of vibrancy to downtown. Their ability to get 60 people extra in that space, of course, makes their whole restaurant much more valuable. I don't know what the total capacity is otherwise, but you're really increasing your capacity probably by what, 35%?
Well, we don't have quite 60 seats out there. It's a little shy of 50, but
We have 130, so.
well, no.
Without the back.
Yeah, we have 110 and 115.
Yeah, so it makes the restaurant a lot more viable. I guess what I see though is in terms of kind of the fee that we're charging now, and obviously very hard to equate what it is. But even if you figure that if it's, 500 a month and you're getting an extra 50 people in there, whatever, that's costing you $10 per person for the month. I think that our fee is low. Obviously, it's outdoor space. We do structure. I think that there would be, certainly is opportunity for more. People certainly do ask me, you're about trustee, what's Guildhall paying? People do ask that, and I think right now it was an amount that was really very much of a COVID amount, and that we, if we're interested in renewing this thing, I think it could be at an increased number.
Okay. Trustees, so when I, at these meetings, I hear a lot of people think Joe says they can keep it. If you've heard from me, I think, having listened to all this, I think, okay, let's do another year, and then there'll sort of be an understanding we're gonna do something different after that. And to me, the criteria should be, it's gotta be something that we're gonna be able to say to other folks in town, you can do this too.
The next thing.
Whatever the next thing is, then, you know, so we wanna hear. So that's my only concern.
I mean,
I
we did.
appreciate everything the litigants, that all these folks have died, you know, I get it. If they hadn't done what they did with Writers Theater and with this restaurant, we might be the Glencoe I grew up in. And that was a, you know, you can get a parking space at 5:30 because there was nobody here. But balancing that out.
Sorry, I'm not a member. Can I make a comment? Sure. Sorry. Okay. Which people always do this, I'll throw out a straw man and people can use it in the trash if they want. But it would be super helpful for planning to have a year. We weren't looking to do it forever. My suggestion would be, if it makes, I don't, if it even works this way, or if you guys have done it before. I think it could be worthwhile getting a group of people. I'm friends with Pete Cadence, I'm friends with Louis, like we're all friends. I don't know some of the other restaurants, Megs and Valor, but easy to get group people together, not excluding anybody. And get a little, internal, external group together to talk about two things. What happens in the year afterward? Because some people are going to go, wait a minute, if Guildhall loses all of it, then I'm going to lose my spot. I can't, and there could be an optimization, but it's done along, it's like a public-private partnership. The second thing would be, I also just, a math major and whatever, I think your instinct is right and yours is right. And this is against me, but I don't think the price is right. I think that the cost is wrong. The question is, what should it be? The marginal value of that space might be zero. You're not getting rent from the public, but the margin of value to us is something higher. But someone needs to really think that through, and that's a business kind of thing. I'm totally happy, by the way, volunteering myself. I'll be a part of a group sitting through that, even if it means I'm spending more money. I just like coming to the proper rational set of things. And so maybe those two things, internal, external, one group thinking about 1 year forward, how's this going to work? One group sitting going for right now, not a year forward. How do you think about the value of that, Louis? How do we think about it? And I'll be very open about that and be very transparent. That could be something. So my gut would be like that. My straw man would be great to have a year, break even. Then we can plan, and there could be lots of discussion around how you do it for everybody. I'm not looking for anything different from anything than anybody else. And also happy to help the city raise revenue even from us. The only other thing that for people that have fodder, if they get lots of questions, I probably was not as aware that everybody's getting so many questions from the populace. But the one thing I will say is that there is an extra 1% tax only on food establishments. And so, if people can't, and this doesn't really affect us, so I'm now speaking on Louis' behalf more. If people can't come and get takeout with all this, I don't like DoorDash, I don't use it. My kids seem to. But, it's like, that's a lot of extra revenue. So it's even if you're not getting about a fee for that, the 1% on top of that may add up to a fair amount of money. And if you got rid of it, and so all of a sudden, all that takeaway goes down, that might be, someone here should figure out the calculus of that number to make sure they know what would that be a reduction of revenue. And that's not really a Guildhall thing. So I'm not even speaking my own book, so to speak. I'm just for the city. But that group should probably, if I was on the committee, and everybody knows how I work, I want all the information, I want to ingest the data. What are we doing here? But I'll just throw out that I think there would be a very willing group of people, and if not, I'll coerce them into having a discussion about what should go forward and then what should be the right cost for that. But you can also say terrible idea, and that's fine too, or you can discuss it later. But I think that would work.
You don't come to a lot of these meetings, and by the way, I don't encourage people to come to them. Because it can be painful. We volunteered for this, so we come, and that's the cross we bear. But you've internalized somehow by walking around and breathing the air the way we would and should approach it. So let me say, I think we should do all of what you just said, and we can. So let me make a suggestion for what staff should be thinking of. Gary, go ahead.
Well, just before we get any further, because if you really want a stupid idea to throw in the trash, to think about in terms of we're redoing the plan for the village as a whole. And people keep, and I've been guilty of it too. Well, you can't do for one what you can't do for everybody. That's actually not true, is it, Steve? So let's start with right now, in terms of immediacy, I will just tell you, I'm fine with another year, notwithstanding however the calculus comes out. My gut tells me I'm in agreement with our appraiser over here that the current rent is too low. That said, we're not trying to get rich on the rent, just trying to make it seem a little fair. But on a longer term basis, you just signed up a lease. God knows what kind of numbers for 10 years. This tells me that there could be a market if the village decided they can live without those spaces to have a private public partnership, if you will, in effect, without necessarily having one technically, because the village could decide to streetscape that area and make it a big old sidewalk. And now put a semi-permanent, a real structure on something that's got all the right kinds of plumbing and electric and this and that, and the other available to it. So that instead of what is obviously a temporary structure that's just there a long time, you have something that kind of looks like it's just another building with the sidewalk running in between, whether it's a lot of glass, so it's see-through, whatever. At that point, way beyond my purview. I don't have any taste, just asking. That was one thing she said I did. But you can see if people are willing to make long-term commitments so that the village knows what the finances are about that and how they're going to recoup it. That could make something that hopefully everybody likes to look at. And it enhances the community if we know for a period of time, we can have something there that everyone agrees benefits the village. Sure.
So let me say, I want to distinguish between the spaces and the structure. Because I think there's a difference. I don't know that we can lose spaces. And we can make that available to lots of folks. But what we probably can't do, and and I'm not talking about whether we could legally do it, but what I'm concerned about is we can't have, I don't think, a uptown business district, which is tiny and it's not huge streets, not huge sidewalks. I don't think we can do that with a bunch of additional structures. I think our business district would look weird and would be unpleasant for people. And that's why we could consider anything. And so what I would propose is that we say guidance for our staff. Okay, another year, so they're not punished, and so they can keep this up. And during this year, everybody, anybody who wants to be on the Litterwoods committee and staff and our planners would try to figure out, okay, what are we doing with our uptown business district? What do people want to do? And then try to come up with something that, everybody's kind of happy with.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, the article in the New York Times talked about the revisions to the New York City ordinance and also in Paris, France.
The Glencoe of France.
I'm not saying this is the way we should go, but they came up with a thing where the structures would be removed for the winter and reconstructed in the spring. They wanted to control that outdoor feel and look. And I want to say how important I think that is for community. The problem I have with I'll call it the shed or the structure, is it builds a barrier between the community. And when it's open, you walk down the street, oh, George is having coffee over here, you know, you can go over and see them. It helps build community. So it's a design concern. The other thing I think that I just co-taught this thing in urban economics. One of the things that we were talking about was how do you allocate scarcity? And you pay for it. It's, you know, one of the ways to deal with it. And, you know, I don't know if we're gonna auction off spaces or whatever, but there are a lot of other economical, using urban economics to allocate scarcity as well. That's just something for us to look into.
So I Aspen, Colorado, Aspen of Illinois. Aspen, Colorado got tough with the businesses that all had built structures. Had to cut back. I'm not positive what the right answer is. But anyway, what I would suggest, unless I watched and Joe, you may want to answer.
Can I make one more comment?
Absolutely.
As Gail listener would know, in the world of real estate and appraisals, no real estate is the same. No restaurant is the same. So while Alec brings out Pete and honey butter fried chicken and Louis and the other two restaurants, actually, we know the Merlots because they're our neighbor at Reach as well. That was the awning that we replaced, and we know his wife well. We don't all have the same conditions. Like Louis, luckiest guy ever. He has a sidewalk the size of Soldier Field. And Pete
Yes.
Cadence finds a backyard
Yes.
that happens to be sitting back there that's like larger than his restaurant. We were
But the neighbors want no noise.
People are all dancing, listening to their own music. If you'll eat and be silent, everyone will be fine. Don't talk.
New concept.
Yeah.
I totally get that point. And I think we're not solving all this now. I feel like I've heard you. I don't know that, feel we've heard you, but I feel like I have. And I think the staff has. So what I would suggest is let's, until I met with the team on Tuesday, I didn't know, but I got the impression, having met, I think, okay, we'll plan on another year, and we'll plan on not the same thing after that, but I don't know exactly what it will be, and we should convene staff and the Litowitz Committee of our restaurant entrepreneurs to talk about, and our planners to talk about what our uptown business district should look like. And we'll try to come to an answer. My gut, but it's not necessarily everybody's gut, and I would not even pretend to dictate this, is I don't love the big structure. And I know we can't have a bunch of that's my concern, and we'll try to figure out a way to do this so that you aren't punished, because we can't give you favoritism, but we are grateful and we know, how important you guys are. Is that a fair thing to send our staff with? Okay. All right, well, it sounds like we have a plan. Thank you for coming. If you ever want to tell us what you think, we want to hear it. Doesn't have to be at a formal meeting. So stay in touch with staff. And again, we are so grateful for what you've done for this. I've lived here forever. So I remember when, it was just Ray's Sport Shop and then it's way better now, and it's because of you. So we want to keep it that way.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks for your
And,
time.
I'll connect with you and
Absolutely.
whenever people want.
Yep.
If it's one committee with two requirements, what's the money and what it looks like afterward, or two separate ones, just someone needs to knock on my door and then or.
You'll do the math.
I'll do some of that. Yeah.
You need
Thank
to
you.
I got half the brain, I got the other.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is review and discussion of public comment rules for Village of Glencoe open meetings. I'll ask our village attorney, Steve Elrod, to present. Since the last one took, a little longer maybe than we hoped, you're gonna be brief.
I will, thank you. I've worked with Jonathan and with the village manager. But this actually started, for those of you who were at our biennial seminar at the Glen in May, you'll recall a presentation that I made along with one of my attorneys, Caitlin Culbertson, about an amusing presentation about the abuses that could occur, not in Glencoe, but possibly during the public comment time. As our village president likes to observe, we usually have a total of one people at our public comment time, but it's public comment and anybody can come, and there have been very difficult times that I've witnessed all over our practice area and all over the north suburbs. So what we've done for all of our clients is we've developed a set of model public comment rules. And we distributed them to all of our clients. The version that you have before you has been reviewed by the village president, by Jonathan and by Phil, to tailor them a little bit to Glencoe. And I want to just go over high-level highlights. I think that they all make sense. I hope you've read them and see if you have any concerns. And we're putting all this in here so that we can manage the expectations of your constituents, so that when they come to make public comment, they can understand. And we had this actually not so far long ago, one that came and they were talking about a matter that wasn't even within your purview. It happened to be for another public body. So this is to help manage expectations so that you don't necessarily look like the bad guys. We have rules and everyone's expected to follow the rules. Quick overview of the rules. One is that they have to talk on a topic that is germane to matters within the specific purview of the public body. And by the way, these rules read public body and other generic terms because they're applicable not only to you as the village board, but to all of your subordinate boards and commissions. They will abide by. And also, by the way, this is for public comment time, not public hearings. The Plan Commission, for example, the ZBA, they conduct public hearings. Those have a completely separate set of rules. You sometimes have a public hearing for certain statutorily required things. That's a different animal. This is your public comment time that the Illinois State Legislature in its infinite wisdom said all municipalities must have at every meeting. So we're doing that. One other thing, though, that we have in here, if you have rules, you don't have to have it on a meeting, it's our firm's opinion, that is on the same night as another meeting. So when you have your committee of the whole on the same night as your village board meeting, you can have the public comment time only during your village board meeting. So what you went through a little earlier today, you could eliminate that from your committee of the whole agenda and have public comment time only on your village board. It provides that here. We have the 3-minute rule. You already have a 3-minute rule. We just picked up on that. We want to make sure it's carefully enforced. We have a requirement that speakers register in advance, that simply fill out a form so that we know who is speaking. Do we have that right now? Do we require?
There's a form upstairs. Yep.
That form will provide a succinct set of the rules so that they will know what's happening. And it'll very clearly say that this public comment time is intended to be a forum for somebody to make comments to the village board, not a discourse, not a conversation. That's a public hearing. This is public comment. This is for them to make, and it's going to very clearly say, don't expect there to be a response or a discourse, so that someone's not upset if you're just sitting there saying, all right, thank you, we'll have the village manager handle that. That should be their expectation, the normal course. Instead of them saying, well, I want you to answer me now, you say, no, that's not our rules. We don't do that. This is not a two-way conversation. It's for you to talk to us. And And by the way, for you to talk only to us. Do not talk to anyone else in the audience. Do not talk to our staff. Talk to us. That's what these rules also say this. They say that you're going to allot 30 minutes during that public comment time portion of the agenda. And if you don't get to everybody in 30 minutes, this is highly unusual in Glencoe, but you will get to them, but you'll continue with all of your other regular business and push the remainder of public comment time at the end, to the end of the meeting. That's fairly common, but just want to make sure that people don't feel that we have these in rules up front, so they know that that's what we're going to be doing. The only other thing I want to point out, we very carefully crafted this to be in compliance with the First Amendment. So it says that all speakers shall be respectful of the public body, and should be courteous, polite, and civil. We can demand that. And then no speaker may engage in conduct or speech that is imminently threatening to any person, that incites violence, or that is obscene. All three of those things are reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions that can be placed on the First Amendment. We cannot, or we shouldn't, have a provision that prohibits somebody from criticizing the mayor or the manager. That's allowed. We shouldn't have that somebody refrain from using swear words. For better or worse, our Supreme Court has said that that's allowed in public. So, but obscenity, of course, we'll know it when we see it, can be regulated. So I carefully crafted that in a way that will be compliant with the First Amendment. I will tell you, some municipalities said, well, to hell with the First Amendment. I want to have a provision in here that prohibits vulgarity and prohibits swear words. Up to you. I would.
Last year.
What?
There was a case last year. We're not doing that.
You are correct. Well, some of your neighboring towns have decided otherwise. I would recommend that you stick with the way that it is drafted. The courteous, polite, and civil. I think you can always have no applauding. That's all. That's all part of this. No disrupting of the meeting. This also gives the presiding officer, who is the village president in our meetings, the right to have someone removed from the room. And so the village president will talk to the police chief or whoever is there from the Department of Public Safety to implement that rule, but that is a prerogative of the village president. The only other thing, during COVID, we allowed written comments to be submitted and read into the record. This prohibits that. If you want to make a public comment, you come to the village hall. And that's what this provides. Doesn't say you can't submit written comments. That's allowed, and we'll be sure to distribute them, but they're not going to be read aloud during public comment time. So those are the rules. The only thing that you may want to consider, and I will send this to Phil, some of our towns have asked that, and you don't have to do this if there's no one in the audience, but to have a little script for the village president to read. Howard has improvised very nicely, by the way. You did it in a really great way today during the committee of the whole, but to have a written script to say a lot, to have a lot of these things, and also to have this happens to be for another town, but I give you an example. To have something like this on your agenda or in the back of the room, in laminate or something, so that everyone can see these rules in advance and understand them and know that they apply to all and are not just being enforced against that one particular person. And then I'll close. So the manager and I we'll review this, and you can determine whether you want to have that. One other thing, the 3-minute rule. I just really want to emphasize that it's so important to enforce it and enforce it evenly. It's very difficult too. You may have the town patriarch or matriarch or somebody who is, the revered coming in, a member of the clergy, somebody that is speaking and saying wonderful things and complimenting each one of you and saying just fantastic stuff. And you'll love to have them go on. Please take 5 minutes. Don't do it. Treat them the same way you would treat somebody who is saying, who is criticizing you. It's very important that you apply it evenly and you let everyone know we're enforcing it evenly, so that when you do have a problem situation, you can very directly say, nope, your 3 minutes are up. And we enforce this fairly evenly and non-discriminatory.
Let me ask a question about that. Is that apply it evenly at a particular meeting? In other words, if we have one person and that's it, and we look around and see it's one person, I sort of feel like, okay, 5 minutes, what do I care? As long as, but if there's but at the next meeting, if there are 20 people.
So here's how I would handle that. If you make the exception before anyone starts to speak, we have now public comment time. You may know by the receipts you get, or you may know by a show of hands. Before anyone starts to speak, you can say for this particular meeting, and you'll have to do it with the consensus of the board, you can say, is there a consensus to allow an exception to our 3-minute rule? But don't do it midway through a speaker. Don't do it after 2 people have spoken and then you get to the third one. Do it before. That would be the way to handle that.
Okay.
And also one other thing, by the way, this is only during public comment time. If someone's here during an agenda item or making a presentation, that's not, the same rules don't necessarily apply. You could vary that.
Although we do.
You do it.
Tend to.
Yeah, but if you want to give somebody extra time because they're making a presentation, or a presentation for a rezoning or something that may be more complicated than 3 minutes, you have that.
I thought there was something in there that I read that you provided for that the president could decide in advance. I thought it was already.
Yeah,
It's covered expressly.
Yeah,
You can decide at the start.
I was asking a different question. I was asking, can you be lax in the January meeting? Because it's only one person, and then February say, look at our, say.
Right.
we're
The answer
not
is
getting-
yes,
Okay.
but as long as you do it.
But we have to do it a
before.
little more formally than we've done.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's.
So I was just wondering about the difference between that item C and item D under
What
number 2. So number C was what we were kind of talking about now, where you could, additional time could be allocated at discretion of the presiding officer. I was just wondering about D. So it says a speaker may not yield time to another speaker.
Right.
Because I see that going on in lots
You
of.
see that in Congress a lot, you see that.
Well,
But no,
but I mean, I've seen it in other zoning boards. and
In
other
fact, those of you that were on the board during the cannabis discussion will recall that there were several attempts to do that. President Levin cut it off, but there were people in the audience that said, I have a minute left. I want to give that minute to my friend Betty Jones. That's the kind of thing that we would prohibit. But C
would take.
C
care of
is
it.
if somebody is here on behalf of a homeowners association or on behalf of everybody on a street. We actually would encourage somebody, you take a little more time instead of having all 50 people on the street talk. You may want to give 9 minutes to a single person, so long as they are indeed representing the homeowners or the street. And then none of them talk then.
Let me say, I just went through these before.
Yeah,
They're pretty good.
you're good.
They're pretty
Okay,
good.
you're good. I won't tell you, lawyer. Yeah, I was just trying to. God forbid that I would say lawyer. Yeah, I was just looking at that D item going, well, you could say you're representing some other people and I guess.
But that'll have to be done in advance though, Gail.
That is it. Okay, before they start.
Yes, before they start.
Okay, thank you.
All of a sudden, they can't be representing.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Have you ever where someone is disorderly or?
That's a great question. That's very difficult. It's public property. If we believe that somebody, because of their past behavior, poses an imminent threat to the village, and we sometimes do this if they're coming to a counter frequently, we can prevent them from entering Village Hall. We may need to get a court order. But just because they've been disruptive before, we can't assume that they'll be disruptive again. If they start, we can take immediate action.
There was a guy, a lawyer, who filed like 1,000 cases And eventually the district court, Chicago said, no, you have to get permission to file, otherwise you can't file. You'll see.
Yeah,
The name will come to us. It can happen. It's pretty infrequent and it's gotta
it's
be.
an abuse of the system. We see that with FOIAs, people abusing the FOIA, filing excessive. But it's a difficult standard and I would caution, I don't want to write that into a rule. It's not a Glencoe.
Okay.
It's not a Glencoe.
Anybody else want to talk about our?
So
comment?
what we do, Howard, would, if you do have consensus, and I see that that's where you're going, we would then have a resolution approving this on a open agenda of the village board.
Great. Okay.
Steve, one question. We talked about this very much in the vantage point of the village board. Boards and commissions that are subject to the village board, these same rules would cascade down to the boards and commissions, right?
Correct.
Okay,
And they don't need to re-adopt them. The
No.
village board's kind of taking action on
Correct.
behalf.
just want to clarify that.
Yeah, and before, what you may want to do before it's on the board agenda is notify the chairs of all the other boards and
Right.
commissions.
Thank you. Very straightforward and a good job on those. And we probably should have the cheat sheet, but it's not complicated. So, but yes.
But for all the other boards.
Yeah.
In most days,
Right.
your summary would be a lot faster, because reading it would be more longer
And
than the.
everybody knows I'm in favor of fast. Is there any other business anybody wants to talk about? If not, since we have 7 minutes, is there a motion to adjourn?
So we do the closed session.
Let's just do that.
We have 6 minutes.
We don't need much more than that. I think we'll do it after.
We'll do it.
Should we? Yeah, let's do that. We have people that are requesting. Okay, let's have a voice vote. Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Adjourns.